against you. Dadperfectrevenge. Sir, stop! Don't unlock that door. That's what the cleaning lady screamed at me as I walked up my son's driveway in Austin 3 weeks ago. I'm Charles Alexander, 65 years old, and I was just trying to surprise my wife Linda with flowers. I had no idea I was about to discover that my own son had tried to murder his mother for inheritance money. Look, I've seen a lot of crazy stuff in my life. 10 years as a Navy JAG officer, then 35 years as a federal judge. You think you've heard every sick story there is, but nothing, and I mean nothing, prepares you for finding out your own flesh and blood tried to kill your wife for money. The drive from Scottsdale should have taken 5 hours. I made it in 4, breaking every speed limit on E10. Linda hadn't answered her phone in 4 days. 4 whole days of silence from a woman who texted me good morning every single day for 38 years of marriage. I kept telling myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe her phone died. Maybe she got caught up, helping Anthony and Jessica settle into their new house. Maybe the Texas heat had gotten to her. Hell, maybe she was just having so much fun with the grandkids she forgot to call. Simple explanations existed. They had to. But deep down, something felt wrong. You know that gut feeling? After 45 years dealing with criminals and liars, you develop a sixth sense about these things. And my gut was screaming that something was off. Anthony had been different lately. Our son, the boy I'd coached in Little League, the young man I'd helped through business school, had changed over the past year. Every phone call eventually circled back to money. The startup wasn't working out. Jessica's marketing consulting wasn't bringing in enough clients. They were thinking about refinancing, but the rates were terrible. Credit card bills were piling up. And then 3 months ago, the question that made my stomach turn. Dad, have you and Mom updated your estate plan recently? You know, with property values. Going up, it might be worth reviewing. I'd mentioned it to Linda that night. She was reading in bed, glasses perched on her nose, completely relaxed. He's just being practical, she said without looking up. Anthony's always been the planner in the family. Maybe. Or maybe I'd spent 45 years reading people, and something about my son's tone felt calculated rather than curious. When you've sat on the bench for 35 years, you learn to spot when someone's fishing for information. The GPS announced I'd arrived. Anthony's new house sat at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac in a gated community north of Austin. Modern farmhouse style, perfectly manicured lawn, 3-car garage. The kind of house that looked impressive from the outside, but probably came with a mortgage that kept you awake at night, especially for a guy whose tech startup had crashed and burned 6 months earlier. I parked at the curb and stepped out into the humid Texas heat. Must have been 95 degrees, and it was only 10 in the morning. The front yard looked immaculate. No newspapers on the driveway, nothing out of place. Too perfect, actually. Like someone had spent time making sure everything looked normal. I walked toward the front door, rehearsing what I'd say when Linda answered. Surprise, sweetheart. Missed you too much to wait. I had a dozen yellow roses in my hand, her favorites. Figured I'd take her out to lunch, maybe do some shopping, spend a couple of days just enjoying being together. That's when I heard the shouting. Sir, stop. A Hispanic woman was running across the neighbor's lawn, waving her arms frantically. Maybe 50, wearing a cleaning uniform with some company logo I couldn't read. She was out of breath, eyes wide with something that looked like pure terror. Are you the husband? Linda's husband? The question stopped me cold. How the hell did this stranger know my wife's name? Yeah, I'm Charles. How do you know Linda? I clean houses on this street. 3 days ago, I was working next door when I heard screaming, a woman screaming for help, begging someone to call 911. My chest got tight. What happened? I went outside to see your son and his wife. They came out on the lawn, told me everything was fine. Said their mother had a nightmare, was confused from the heat. But sir, she grabbed my arm, that woman grabbed my hand when the paramedics took her. That wasn't confusion. That was someone dying. The world just fell apart right there. Which hospital? Del Seaton Medical Center, I think. But sir, your son and his wife, they didn't go with her. Didn't follow the ambulance. The next morning, their cars were gone. I haven't seen them since. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands, dialed Anthony, straight to voicemail, dialed Jessica. Same thing. Then I called 911, identified myself as a retired federal judge, and demanded information about an ambulance called to this address 3 days ago. The dispatcher put me on hold for what felt like forever. When she came back, her voice had changed, more serious. Mr. Alexander, I show a Linda Alexander transported to Del Seaton Medical Center 3 days ago. Critical condition. Sir, we've been trying to reach family members. I was back in my car before she finished talking. The cleaning lady, Susan Martinez, gave me her phone number and made me promise to call her. I should have done more, she kept saying. I should have tried harder. The hospital was a blur of fluorescent lights and antiseptic smell. I found the ICU on the 4th floor, gave my name to the nurse at the station, and watched her expression change when she checked her computer. That look told me everything I needed to know. This was bad. Mr. Alexander, we've been trying to reach family for 3 days. Your wife was admitted as a Jane Doe initially. No identification, no emergency contacts. We only learned her name yesterday when she regained consciousness briefly. What the hell happened to her? Dr. Martinez was a young woman with tired eyes who led me to a private consultation room, the kind of place they take you when the news is going to knock you on your ass. She sat down across from me and opened a thick folder. Mr. Alexander, your wife suffered severe hypoglycemia, dangerously low blood sugar caused by a massive overdose of diabetes medication. I stared at her. Linda's not diabetic, I know. That's what makes this so concerning. The levels in her system were 10 times what any diabetic would take. Someone gave her enough medication to kill her. My hands started shaking. You're saying someone tried to murder my wife? I'm saying the amount of medication in her system couldn't have been accidental. Another hour without treatment, and we'd be having a very different conversation. I sat there trying to process what she'd just told me. My son, my own flesh and blood, had tried to kill his mother for money, for inheritance. The woman who changed his diapers, stayed up nights when he was sick, cheered at every baseball game. Where is she now? Room 418. She's stable but weak. The brain needs glucose to function. Extended hypoglycemia can cause complications. Memory issues, confusion. We won't know the full extent until she's stronger. I found Linda in a dim room filled with beeping machines. She looked 20 years older than when I'd last seen her, pale, fragile, tubes running into her arms. I pulled a chair close and took her hand. Her skin felt like paper. I'm here now, I whispered, and I'm going to find out who did this. The police arrived an hour later. Detective Rodriguez, Austin PD, a weathered guy in his 50s who looked like he'd seen every kind of human garbage there was. I told him what Susan Martinez had witnessed. I told him about Anthony and Jessica's disappearance. I told him about the financial questions, the estate planning inquiries, the change in my son's behavior. Rodriguez took notes without expression. We'll need to interview your wife when she's able, and we'll want to talk to your son and daughter-in-law. Good luck with that. They're not answering their phones. We'll find them. Linda woke the next morning. I was still in the chair beside her bed, having refused every offer of a cot or hotel room. Her eyes opened slowly, found my face, and filled with tears. Charles. Her voice was barely a whisper. They tried to kill me. Who, sweetheart? Anthony and Jessica. She started crying harder. Our son. Our own son. The story came out in pieces over the next few hours. Linda had arrived in Austin excited to help with the new house. The first 2 days were normal, unpacking boxes, arranging furniture, cooking dinner together. Jessica seemed stressed, but Linda figured it was just the pressure of the move. Then on the 3rd night, Jessica made her tea before bed. Something she'd never done before. I felt strange almost immediately, Linda said. Dizzy, sweating. My heart was racing like I'd run a marathon. I told them something was wrong. I begged Anthony to call 911. What did he say? Linda's face crumpled. He said I was being dramatic. Said it was just the heat, that I'd feel better in the morning. But it got worse. I couldn't stand up. I was shaking so bad I couldn't hold a glass of water. I thought I was having a heart attack. She paused, gathering strength. I screamed for help. I hoped someone outside would hear. That's when the cleaning lady next door must have called 911. Anthony and Jessica went outside to talk to her. Came back saying everything was handled. No ambulance was coming, but the paramedics showed up anyway. Thank God for that woman. Anthony and Jessica, they stood in the doorway and watched the paramedics take me. They didn't say goodbye. They didn't follow. Charles, our son watched strangers carry me away and did nothing. Detective Rodriguez recorded her statement that afternoon. The evidence was building. Linda's toxicology showing massive medication levels, Susan's witness account, Anthony and Jessica's disappearance. But Rodriguez warned me this would be complicated. Without proof they administered the medication, a defense attorney could argue your wife took it herself. Accidentally or intentionally, we need more. That's when I decided to use everything I knew from 45 years in the military and legal system. If the police couldn't get the evidence they needed, I'd damn well get it myself. My first call was to Richard Coleman, a private investigator I'd worked with during complex financial crimes cases. Richard had a talent for finding what people tried to hide. He specialized in digital forensics, financial trails, the kind of work that built bulletproof cases. Anthony Alexander, I told him, my son. I need everything. Finances, debts, recent transactions, anything that shows motive. And I need it fast. Charles, I'm sorry to hear about Linda. Give me 48 hours. Richard called back 2 days later with a report that made me sick to my stomach. Anthony owed money everywhere. Credit cards maxed at $85,000, a second mortgage on their previous house that they'd never disclosed to us, and the cryptocurrency investments that were supposed to make them rich, complete disaster. They'd lost $180,000 in crypto gambling over the past 6 months. There's more, Richard said. 3 weeks before your wife's visit, Jessica called your estate attorney, asked hypothetical questions about inheritance timelines. What happens when someone dies, whether adult children inherit automatically? The attorney thought it was strange, but answered her questions. I hung up and sat in silence for a long time. My son had planned this, researched it, calculated exactly what Linda's death would mean financially. Our estate was worth just over $1.8 million, enough to wipe out their debts and start fresh, enough to kill for, apparently. Anthony and Jessica resurfaced 4 days later. They'd been in Denver, they claimed, at some cryptocurrency conference. A trip planned months in advance, they said. They expressed shock and concern about Linda's condition. Insisted they'd had no idea how serious it was. Said they'd been just about to call 911 when the ambulance arrived unexpectedly. Detective Rodriguez brought them in for questioning the next day. I wasn't allowed to observe, but he briefed me afterward over coffee at the hospital cafeteria. Their alibis line up perfectly. Too perfectly, actually, he said, stirring sugar into his cup. Every detail matches like they memorized a script. Denver hotel receipts, conference registration, even photos at some crypto meetup. But we don't have physical evidence linking them to the medication. No bottles, no receipts, nothing in the house. They had 3 days to clean up. Exactly. Smart enough to dispose of everything before anyone knew Linda was in the hospital. That's when I knew I had to get creative. Look, I'd been a JAG officer dealing with military criminals, then a federal judge for 35 years. You learn a few things about how to build cases when the obvious evidence isn't there. Sometimes you have to make the criminals hang themselves. I called Brian Matthews, my estate attorney, that evening. Brian, I need you to set up an emergency meeting with Anthony and Jessica. Tell them we need to discuss accelerated inheritance planning due to Linda's health scare. Charles, what are you planning? Just trust me. Make it sound urgent, like we're worried about Linda's recovery. Use words like contingency planning and asset protection. These two are desperate for money. Dangle that carrot and they'll come running. The meeting was set for the following Thursday. I arrived early and worked with Richard to set up recording equipment in the conference room. Tiny microphones, digital recorders, the works. Everything was legal. Brian's office, my meeting, my son attending voluntarily. When Anthony and Jessica walked in, I could see the greed in their eyes. They thought Christmas had come early. Anthony was wearing a new suit I knew he couldn't afford. Jessica had a designer purse that probably cost more than most people make in a month. Dad, we're so glad you're being proactive about this, Anthony said, settling into the leather conference chair like he already owned the place. With Mom's health issues, it just makes sense to get everything organized. For the next hour, I watched my son reveal his true nature. He asked detailed questions about asset liquidation timelines. How quickly could the house be sold? Would life insurance policies pay out immediately? How long did probate take in Arizona? Jessica took notes like she was planning a hostile business takeover. You know, I said, leaning back in my chair, the doctors say Linda's recovery might take months. Memory issues, confusion. She might never be completely herself again. That's so sad, Jessica said, not looking sad at all. But at least she's alive, right? Yeah, barely. They said another hour, and I let that hang in the air. Anthony shifted in his seat. Dad, I know this is hard, but we need to think practically. If Mom's medical expenses are going to be ongoing, maybe we should look at restructuring the estate now. To protect assets. Restructuring how? Well, if you transferred some assets to us now, it could help with tax planning. And if something happened to you suddenly, everything would be protected. There it was. The first crack in their facade. Something like, what happened to Mom, you mean? Dad, what are you saying? Anthony's voice got a little higher. I'm saying I've been thinking a lot about that night. Linda's doctors say someone had to give her those medications. Someone who knew exactly how much would be dangerous, but not immediately fatal. Jessica's pen stopped moving. Anthony went pale. The interesting thing, I continued, is that the medication levels were perfect. Just enough to cause serious hypoglycemia, but not so much that death would be immediate, almost like someone researched the exact dosage. Dad, you're scaring us, Jessica said. What are you implying? I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. Someone poisoned my wife. Someone with access to her food and drinks. Someone who knew she'd be alone and vulnerable. Anthony stood up suddenly. This is crazy talk. Mom must have taken something by accident. She's been forgetful lately. Forgetful enough to accidentally take diabetes medication she's never been prescribed? Forgetful enough to take exactly the right amount to nearly kill her? We should go, Jessica said, grabbing her purse. Sit down, I said, my voice carrying the authority of 35 years on the bench. We're not finished. They sat. Old habits die hard, I guess. Even attempted murderers respect their elders sometimes. Here's what I think happened, I said. I think you two are drowning in debt. Cryptocurrency losses, credit card bills, a house you can't afford. I think you looked at Linda and me as your golden ticket out of financial trouble. Anthony's hands were shaking now. You can't prove any of this, can I? Richard Coleman has been very thorough. $85,000 in credit card debt. $180,000 in crypto gambling losses. Second mortgage you never told us about. And then there's Jessica's phone call to my estate attorney 3 weeks ago, asking about inheritance procedures. Jessica's face went white. That was just hypothetical questions. Was it? Because it sounds like research to me. Research into how to collect inheritance money as quickly as possible. The room was dead silent except for the air conditioning humming. Anthony and Jessica looked at each other, having some kind of silent conversation. Finally, Anthony broke. Maybe it was the stress, maybe it was guilt, but something inside him cracked wide open. We were desperate, Dad. The debts, the pressure from the lenders. We thought if something happened to Mom naturally, you'd understand. You'd help us start over. Naturally? I kept my voice level, professional. There was nothing natural about poisoning her tea with diabetes medication. It wasn't supposed to be fatal, Jessica burst out. We researched the dosage online. It was supposed to just make her sick, maybe cause some confusion. We thought it would look like early dementia or something. Anthony shot her a look that could kill. Shut up, Jessica. But she was in full panic mode now. We never meant for her to almost die. When she started shaking and sweating, we got scared. We didn't know what to do. So, you decided to let her die, I said quietly. No. We were going to call 911. We were scared. And then, that cleaning lady called anyway, so we figured everything would work out. Anthony put his head in his hands. Dad, I'm so sorry. I never wanted to hurt Mom. I love her. I love both of you. We just didn't know what else to do. I left that meeting and drove straight to the FBI field office in Austin. Financial crimes involving interstate activity, especially targeting elderly victims, fell under federal jurisdiction. Plus, I knew these guys. After 35 years as a federal judge, you build relationships with law enforcement. Agent Sarah Torres listened to the recordings and reviewed Richard's financial investigation. Her face got grimmer with each piece of evidence. Mr. Alexander, this is one of the clearest cases of elder financial abuse and attempted murder we've seen. The recorded confessions are gold. We'll coordinate with local police for the arrests. How long before you move? Tomorrow morning? We don't want to give them time to run again. They were taken into custody the next morning at 6 a.m. I watched the news coverage from Linda's hospital room. She'd been moved to rehabilitation by then, slowly regaining her strength. Anthony and Jessica in handcuffs, being led into the federal courthouse, their faces on every local news station. The evidence was overwhelming. The recordings, the financial records, the browser history. Richard had recovered showing searches for diabetes medication overdose and how much insulin to cause hypoglycemia. Even their health insurance records showed Jessica had requested extra diabetes supplies for a diabetic family member 2 weeks before Linda's visit. The prosecution offered Jessica a plea deal, but she refused initially. Anthony hired Barbara Phillips, a defense attorney famous for media manipulation. Within days, Phillips had transformed the narrative on local news. Suddenly, Anthony and Jessica were victims of an overbearing father who couldn't accept that his wife had psychological issues. Phillips started giving interviews. Linda Alexander has struggled with depression for years, she claimed. The family has been in denial about her mental health. This is a tragic case of elder confusion, not attempted murder. But this time, I was ready. I'd spent 45 years in legal warfare, and I wasn't about to let some slick attorney rewrite the truth. I held my own press conference with Brian Matthews. My son and daughter-in-law confessed to poisoning my wife, I said directly into the cameras. We have recordings of their admissions. We have evidence of their financial research into inheritance procedures. This isn't about mental health. This is about greed. The trial took 3 months, federal court, so everything was by the book. Jessica eventually took a plea deal when she realized the recordings were admissible. 12 years in federal prison in exchange for testifying against Anthony. Anthony's trial was a different story. Phillips tried everything, claimed Linda had been suicidal, argued that Anthony was just trying to help his mother end her suffering, even suggested that I had somehow coerced the confession. But the jury wasn't buying it. 12 people, mostly middle-aged and older, looked at the evidence and saw exactly what it was. A greedy son and daughter-in-law who tried to kill an innocent woman for money. The recorded confession was played in court. Anthony's voice, clear as day, admitting they'd poisoned Linda. Jessica describing how they'd researched the exact dosage online. Both of them discussing inheritance timelines while Linda fought for her life in the hospital. When Anthony took the stand in his own defense, he tried to paint himself as the victim, claimed he'd been manipulated by Jessica, said the debt had driven him to temporary insanity, begged for mercy because he was a father himself. I sat in that courtroom every single day, watching my son lie to save his own skin. The boy I'd taught to play catch, the young man who'd called me his hero, now sitting there, trying to convince a jury that attempting to murder his mother was somehow understandable. The jury deliberated for 6 hours, guilty on all counts, attempted murder in the first degree, conspiracy to commit murder, elder abuse, mail fraud for the false insurance claims. Anthony screamed when the verdict was read. He turned toward me and Linda, face contorted, with rage, and shouted something about how we'd destroyed his life. Bailiffs restrained him. Barbara Phillips looked at the floor like she wanted to disappear. Sentencing came 6 weeks later. Judge Patricia Wilson, a colleague of mine from the federal bench, delivered her decision with visible disgust. Mr. Alexander, you researched how to kill your mother. You and your wife administered potentially fatal medication while she begged for mercy. The only reason Linda Alexander is alive today is because a cleaning lady had the courage to call 911 despite your attempts to stop her. She paused, looked directly at Anthony. 18 years in federal prison. You will not be eligible for parole until you have served at least 15 years. Jessica had already been sentenced to 12 years as part of her cooperation deal. The civil case was easier. With criminal convictions, proving liability was straightforward. We recovered everything they'd stolen from joint accounts, plus damages for Linda's medical. Expenses. Not that there was much to collect. They had declared bankruptcy. Their house was in foreclosure. Their accounts drained by legal fees. Linda and I returned to Scottsdale last month. The rehabilitation is ongoing. She still has memory issues, moments of confusion that the doctors say might never fully resolve. But she's alive. She's home. She's with me. We updated our will the week after the trial. Everything goes to charity now. The Alzheimer's Association, St. Jude's Children's Hospital, a scholarship fund at the law school where I once taught. Not a single dollar to Anthony or any future descendants. The money he tried to kill for will help strangers instead. Last week, I received a letter from Anthony. 3 pages of apologies, explanations, pleas for forgiveness. He blamed Jessica for everything, said the debt had driven him crazy, claimed he never really wanted to hurt Linda, asked if there was any way to rebuild what we'd lost. I read it once, then put it through. The shredder. Some doors, once closed, stay closed forever. You know what the hardest part is? It's not the betrayal, though that cuts deep. It's knowing that somewhere along the way, I failed as a father. Maybe I was too focused on my career, too strict, too distant. Maybe I didn't teach him the right values. Maybe I should have seen the warning signs earlier. But Linda reminds me that we didn't create Anthony's choices. We gave him love, support, education, opportunities. What he did with those gifts was up to him. And what he chose was greed over family, money over morality, selfishness over love. Susan Martinez, the cleaning lady who saved Linda's life, comes to dinner once a month now. She won't accept any more money from us, but she'll accept friendship. Sometimes heroes come in unexpected packages. If you learned anything from our story, let it be this. Pay attention to the warning signs. When family members start asking about inheritance, when there are financial problems, become your emergency when they show up at your door with sudden interest in your estate planning, be careful. Not everyone who shares your blood shares your values. And if you ever find yourself in a situation like ours, don't hesitate to fight back. Use every tool at your disposal. Protect the people you love, even if it means destroying the people who've betrayed you. Some battles are worth fighting, no matter the cost. Trust is earned daily, not inherited through blood. And when someone shows you their true character through their actions, believe them the first time. The greatest tragedy isn't losing money to family betrayal. It's realizing that the people you raised and trusted never truly valued the life you gave them over the wealth you built.